Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are, everyone. And thank you for joining the February OWASP Global Board meeting. It is actually the third meeting we've had in February as a board, fourth, sorry, that we've had as a board. So there's going to be quite a few minutes to approve later. Andrew, do you have the ability to let people into the room?
I am doing it now.
Ah, perfect. Okay, starting with a call to order and a note of everyone of the board who's actually present, and I'm going to have to go through my participants list because I don't have a nice magic squares view. So the top of the list is Bill.
Here.
And then Mark.
Yep, here.
And then Matt.
Here.
And then Avi.
Here.
And Glenn.
Yep.
And who else? And we have a number of guests. I will just mention the staff: Kelly, Lauren, Lisa, Selby, and of course, Andrew and Harold.
Yeah.
Quite a full house.
And Dawn.
And Dawn, indeed. I did say hello to you earlier. Sorry, Dawn. In fact, it is a full house. As is normal, there's just a quick statement about the conflict of interest and antitrust statements. Should any business of the board being discussed this evening, this afternoon, in this meeting, should you as a board member have a conflict of interest, please just let us know so that we can decide whether that conflict of interest should prevent you from participating in the discussion or from voting on the topic. I don't think there are any that I can think of, but if there are, just let us know. Starting with the approval of minutes, there are 4 sets of minutes I'm going to call for a vote 4 times. The previous meeting minutes for January, and then I'm going to try and go through that list in the order except it's shuffled again. Start with Glenn.
Yes.
And Mark.
If you could just pass, I'm trying to figure out which meetings I was attending. So come back to me if you can.
Sure. Matt.
Yes.
Bill.
This is for what, the January meeting?
For the January meeting, yes.
Yes.
Avi.
Yes.
And I think I'm back to you again, Mark.
Yeah, apologies. Yes. Yes.
And it's a yes from me too.
Sorry to interrupt, Grant.
Mhm.
For these February meetings, just an FYI, I did not see these minutes. I was never given them. They were just posted today. So I don't know who did these minutes.
Yeah, they were done by me, and I did ask Andrew and Bill to take a look.
Okay,
Oh,
all right.
and
Just
Matt.
I wanted to make sure
No,
that
me.
someone knows I didn't see them.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. I appreciate it. So these were these additional February minutes are from the 2 meetings that took place in Dublin. The first of them being the strategy meeting that was planned for in person in Dublin. The second being the leaders combined with board meeting on the 15th, evening of the 15th in Dublin. And then there was a board meeting called on the 23rd of February for us to continue the discussions around the strategic changes, strategic decisions. Starting
So
with
Sorry,
Yeah.
just one quick question since I didn't get to see them. You did all the attendance, like if someone was an hour late, they get marked that way, all that's done, right? So I know to do it, bring it over for attendance and voting history.
Yeah, so in all 3 cases, all the attendees were present the entire time,
Okay,
entire
thank
duration of
you.
time for them.
That does bring up one thing which I haven't had a chance to talk with the impacted director, but since we haven't updated director attendance yet. So since the board has made a decision to make all board meetings public, then all board meetings that are public have formed part of the attendance requirements. There is a 75% attendance requirement. I think you probably have to let it slide for the time being because it's a recent change and we haven't updated the director's attendance tab. So if you feel like you've missed a few public meetings, it's really important when we update the things to keep on top of that. what happens is a mandatory vote of confidence. In the past, the boards have decided to, vote to confirm confidence in the actual candidate, in the directors who've fallen underneath, because usually there's a very good reason for not coming. But just letting you know that there's a mandatory vote of confidence if you fall below 35%.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I heard everything you said, but it was very difficult to pick out your words. I think there might be a problem with your microphone, unless it's just me.
No,
I'll
Sounded a
come
bit
back to
underwater.
this. Yeah, I'll get my computer sorted out, and I will come back and talk to that during my part of the briefing.
perfect. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so starting with February 14th minutes, and starting with Mark, who's now at the top of my list.
So February 14th, Grant, I noticed there's a comment in there about co-signing the open letter, which says that Glenn and I did it, but you've also done it as well. So I don't know whether you did it afterwards. That needs to be reflected, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, so at the time of the meeting and at the time of them taking the minutes, I had not yet signed the open letter.
Okay, cool. Then all reflected and all looks good.
Matt? So this is just for the 14th.
Oh, for the 14th, yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Harvey?
14th was yes. Okay, figure out which one that was. Yes.
And I believe, have I called for Bill yet?
No, my vote is yes. You haven't called me.
Okay, so then I think I've now got all of us, and it's a yes from my side as well. Has anyone been able to reach Vandana? Just curiosity as to whether.
I pinged her, but no.
Okay. For February the 15th, starting with you, Bill.
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Avi?
Yes.
Mark? Mark wasn't actually present.
I was not present, so I don't know whether that's recuse, no, whatever the appropriate phrase is.
Abstain.
Abstain. Yeah.
Abstain. There you go. Thanks, Andrew.
And it's a yes from my side as well. And then the same for the February 23rd minutes. Bill?
Yes.
Glenn?
Well, most of it.
Okay, is there something that I...
No, that that I put a doodle together to see if the next hackathon. I'm not sure. Yeah, that
Okay.
was so most of it, but not that part.
Okay, so what do we do to amend the minutes then, Andrew?
We can do it and then come back and reapprove them at a later date. So just take
Okay.
Glenn's, maybe just find out from the rest of the board if they've got any other concerns as well, and then come back and redo it in March.
Okay, Avi? Any concerns with the minutes?
No concerns.
I don't know if I asked you already, Bill,
Mine's yes.
and Matt.
Yes, I approve them. I don't have any concerns.
Okay, and there's approval from my side as well. But as Glenn does have a concern, it was the action that I thought I'd assigned to Glenn, which was to find some time for us to meet as a board on a full day. Well, the suggestion was made by Glenn, and so I asked him to put together a doodle for that.
Yeah, correct. The suggestion was mine, but maybe I was really overloaded and didn't hear it, but I cannot remember it because then I would already put something together and yeah, do it.
Okay.
So, my apologies if I was, but I can't recall it, so that's why.
Shall we take your vote then as an abstain then?
Please do.
Okay, and then we'll at this point approve the minutes. Glenn, if you wouldn't mind putting together a doodle, because I think you're right. We probably will get more done if we actually get a whole day to do it in.
Mhm. Yeah, if you agree, then I can put it on me.
Okay, then I hope everyone's had a chance to look at the pre-reading. And with that, Andrew, how's your microphone doing?
Can you hear me properly?
It is
Mhm.
way better.
That's good. I've changed across to USB connected things rather than Bluetooth connected things. So I can share my screen and go through the slides.
Sure. If you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Okay. It's over here.
Yep.
And I've got to move you guys out of the road. Okay, so this month we've been basically looking at the open letter response. There's been, as we've just gone through, a number of board strategy meetings. We do need to fill out the rest of the strategy, and I think, you know, as I've started to write the plan, it's become really obvious to me that there's many areas of the strategy that are not yet fleshed out with board viewpoints. And so that full day that you're talking about would be a very good thing to do. This is obviously going to delay the eventual plan, so it might be worthwhile communicating with the plan letter writers and folks who've signed on to let them know that there is a plan underway, and give them a deadline as to when it might be finished. But it isn't their 4 or 5 bullet points, it's our overall strategy. We've got a lot of things that we've got to get done. And I think that full day planning is going to be an essential component of it. Earlier this month, I started a town hall and for the OWASP top 10s reboot. This is essentially to try to get as many of the OWASP top 10s going again. There was a kickoff meeting and we had very excellent attendance. Over 200 people turned up over the day. So this shows that we've got a vibrant community willing to work on the OWASP top 10s. Just taking my executive hat off for a tick and putting the OWASP top 10 hat on, the OWASP top 10 2024 is getting going. And we're looking to release possibly in time for the AppSec EU or AppSec San Francisco next year. We're not sure when the actual date will be. It will depend heavily upon the data we collect. Obviously, for the week that AppSec Dublin was on, I was working Dublin time and was in the meetings with you guys. That took a fair amount of time. The bylaws, the thing that I wanted to just let you know is that we're collecting the lawyers want specific dates for every single officer and every single director. Now we've got the directors sorted. I'm working on the officers. That one's a bit harder because we didn't really have a good record. And quite frankly, I don't know, for example, when Sarah Barzo was hired, and I don't know when she left. This sort of predates our records. So I'm going to have to put 2013 for when she left. I'm not sure if it's 2011 or 2012 when she started. I will have to have a look and sort of guess.
Is the list of officers not the board officers, as in chair, vice chair?
Sarah acted as the executive director.
Okay.
So every time we had an executive director, and we've had a few, we need to do that. And then there's the folks who were acting as the executive director who weren't the executive director, like Kate Hartman. I think for the sake of expediency, I will just simply put the people who had the title executive director in this list, and we'll work from there.
Okay.
Okay.
If there's anything the board can do to help, Andrew, let us know.
I think the main one would be, I've got the affidavits that we need to fill in. And once we actually get to a place where the lawyers are ready to send it out with a cover letter, I will need you to help me find people who we've lost contact with. For example, I haven't really heard from Johanna Curiel or Jonathan Carter recently, and there's part of the, you know, we want as many of the boards as possible to sign on.
Okay.
Okay, so we're working fast on that. It'll come through. Operations. We've been doing a major cleanup of our tickets, and so you'll see a little dip in February. It should be better next month. We've managed to clean up a lot of tickets, keeping focus on our time to resolution and time to first response and get them back to where they should be, which is preferably above 90%. 95% is an absolute goal, but we're not quite there at this very moment. So a renewed focus on these metrics will help us improve our customer service. The service desk is where we get, you know, expenses paid and things like that. So obviously, whilst Dublin was going on, there was a lot of to and fro with a lot of extra tickets. So again, not great statistics this month, but I would imagine that in future months it will be much better because the load will go down, and also a lot of the old tickets have been cleared. You might have heard me at the beginning of this session say that I've closed tickets that were unclosable. So that closed out 22 tickets, for example, that just did not need to be part of the statistics.
Andrew, could you just educate me? What is the SLA for tickets, the time to response, etc.?
3 business days is the time to the first contact. And after that, because of the nature of to and fro with the people, we basically try to close tickets within 2 weeks. Okay. It's just that generally we will wait for customers for up to 2 weeks, a month in certain cases, and then we'll close the ticket if we haven't heard back from them.
Okay. 3 days seems a hell of a long time, doesn't it?
It is, but that was the SLA that I inherited, and it seems to be working. It's just we'll come back and revisit this when we actually look at the strategy. Okay. Finance, Shelby.
All right, thank you. Andrew, if you don't mind just flipping through the slides as I go, I didn't get access to them this time, so I can't share my screen, but I'll just go through my report and I'll let you know when to hit the next one.
Yep.
All right, thank you. So revenue for January 2023 came in at $56,229 versus our draft budget. We had approximately 72,000 budgeted. So we were about 15,000 under the draft budget. The majority of this difference is due to the corporate and individual memberships. So corporate memberships came in at 26,000, which was about 11,500 under the draft budget of 37,000. And then individual memberships, they came in at about $24,000. So we're about 1,000 under the draft budget of 25. You can see project and technology income came in at $5,368. And so I just went ahead and listed the amounts we received directly. So $500 went to that MASBS, and then 4,700 went to mobile security, and 100 went to Z Attack. Same thing for donations. We got about $1,000 in donations. We had projected to receive 9,000, so we're about 8,000 under. And then I listed the donations down there that we received as well. The last one I just want to note is that the $500 at the bottom included is actually a donation to the Japan local chapter. So just to highlight there. And we can go to the next slide, unless anyone has any questions here.
Obviously 1 month into the year is the same as year to date. So we'll skip forward to the monthly expenses.
Perfect. Yep. Okay. So monthly expenses for January came in at about $163,000. We had budgeted about $119,500. So we're 43,000 over the budget. So the biggest reason for this is that events were over budget by about $40,000. And this is for bills trickling in that were related to the events for last year. So I listed out each bill that came in, but A lot of it was for the Global AppSec San Francisco, and then we had some Benelux prizes, and I think that's about it there.
Just highlighting, there is a business item again on economy class travel in this month's meeting. Shelby has done the work to find out the total cost of airfares last year. So when we come to that item, just remember that there is the airfares available for the board to inspect.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Andrew, for that note.
Yep. Okay, so net income.
Yep, so net income came in at a loss of $106,623. So we had projected a loss of about $48,000. And this is larger than the draft budget. That's mostly due to the bills that came in from the events for last year. And then just projecting that member income is a little bit lower than we had in the budget.
So at some point, Shelby, I'll ask you for an overall profitability of Global AppSec San Francisco, because we thought it was profitable and just want to make sure that it is still profitable when everything's said and done.
Perfect. Yeah. Do we expect any more bills to come in the next couple of months? I'm happy to do a profitability for March, and then if anything else comes in, I could just tack it on if that's helpful for you.
Kelly?
I don't expect any other bills to come in, Shelby.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So for next month's board meeting, I'll have a separate report on that.
Cool.
All right.
So accounts receivable?
Accounts receivable for January were about 204,000. That's 7.5% of total assets, which is good. And then about 10% are over 90 days past due. And I spoke with Andrew and Bill yesterday. I'm going to do a little analysis on those items that are sitting over 90 days past due. Tom had kept some of them on the books because he believed they were items that we could receive the cash for, but I'm going to take another look and see if we need to write some of those off.
Do we need to write them off if we never provide any service?
The way we do it in QuickBooks is we would just issue a credit memo, so it would come off of the AR report.
Okay.
In that manner.
Okay. Cash assets?
Yeah, so cash balance is good. It's $2,750,708. This is 31,000 more than last month and 1.489 million more than January of last year. So that's an 82% increase year over year. The cash reserve is good. It's fantastic. We just still want to keep an eye on our expenses, make sure that we can, have our events as profitable as possible, just to keep, keep a good reserve there.
Alfie?
Thanks. I actually have two comments. A small request, Shelby. In the future, can you also give us this in the view of month's reserve?
There is month's reserve.
Oh, it's in the next.
I thought I saw that. Okay. I thought I had remembered seeing that. Okay, great. The other comment was about the accounts receivable. Is this basically invoices that we billed sponsors and members that they never paid? And if that's the case, why do we need to pay it off?
Well, if they've never paid, it's likely we can either chase them, we can send them a note and say, hey, like, you have this invoice open with us. It's been 2 years. You still haven't paid us.
2 years.
Yeah, so I can look at the aging. I don't have the detail on the report of what year each individual invoice is for, but I can add that and I can circle that report around for you guys so you can see just how old these are.
My thought is, I guess, a little bit Israeli in the concept of if it doesn't work through the regular official channels, via Kelly and whatever, would it make sense to reach out through community members that might have internal contacts there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything that we could do to make them aware, like they have an open invoice and they need to pay us, that would be great.
So perhaps if this is something that can be shared with the board later, and maybe we can see who to reach out to, if possible, if at all.
Definitely. What I'll do is I'll add the invoice number to the AR report and then the date that the invoice was issued so you can see how far it goes back.
Excellent. Thank you.
Of course.
Mark?
I had a question. That's a hell of a lot of cash to be keeping on the books. What's I'm assuming it's basically sort of cash flow is the reason why it's kept. What's the target for it? And why keep so much cash on the books versus invest it back into the community?
I am expecting that we're going to be hiring 1 or 2 new positions this year. We need to pay some big bills for DC's hotel. So some of this is already pre-committed. And so at the end of the day, yes, we've got 2.7 million, and yes, that's a lot of money. I am expecting us to raise our monthly run rate and also, which is investing in our programs, but I'm also expecting to spend the better part of $750,000 on DC hotel bills. So, you know, roughly you could look at it at around $2 million in the bank. That's probably a closer figure. As we're coming out of COVID, this is a nice buffer. I'd personally prefer it if the board had a good strategy meeting and then decided to invest in something. We could afford, for example, to do the website redesign. We could afford to do, you know, more project stuff. It's up to the board to decide that strategy and the priority.
It's actually one of the items for discussion later on.
Okay, makes sense. And I'm assuming there's kind of a financial cash flow amount that is just working capital that's needed. And I'm assuming that's not 2 million, but do we actually have that number, or is that something we need to figure out?
Generally, it's considered 6 months of operational reserve, which at our current run rate of 121,000, Shelby?
That was for last year's budgeted expenses. For this year, I believe it's $187,000 a month.
Okay,
average.
So we're looking at around 1.2 million for a reasonable operational reserve.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, there was operational reserves there. I need to adjust this graph to reflect that higher number of 187,000 so that it gets to the same number of months reserve. Shelby's is 13.7 is correct.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good segue into this slide. So yeah, 13.7 months of reserve. That's for operating expenses, and then 10.4 months if we include the average of all expenses, and that includes event expenses expected as well.
So that's assuming we receive no more money from here on, which is unrealistic.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Shelby. Are there any questions for Shelby before we move on? I'll take that as a no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. The number of individual members continues to grow. We're at 6,700 members, which is a nice milestone. We're on our way to 7,000. We've only got to do 30 new members per month over the next 10 months to get there. And I think that's achievable. Individual chapters, we've got 5 new chapters. Sorry, there's actually 5, 10, 12 new chapters in the last 60 days, which is a good growth. As you can see, the vast majority of them are student chapters, or a goodly percentage of student chapters, which is fantastic for our pipeline. We should be encouraging this. We do need to be a little bit careful of people who open chapters for the resume, but at the same time, activity requirements generally catch up with those folks sooner or later anyway. Okay, Meetup, 117,000 total members since 2009, and at least 71,000, close to 72,000 have RSVP'd to at least one meeting. We've had a lot of meetings and a lot of people attending chapter meetings. So this shows the vibrancy of our community. So any suggestions to the contrary is overstating it by quite a lot. This is some of the best numbers we've had in a long time. So there you go. In 2023, we've already had 90 meetups in the first month. So that's, you know, we're doing well. Obviously, we've rebounded from COVID, and so that's really good. Let me just go to the projects and grants. The project summit.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's ask one question. So 90 meetups in the first 2 months. Adam, how many total chapters are there? I'm sorry, I got terrible eyesight.
Okay, give me 1 sec while we go back.
Trying to quickly do the math.
There is a chapter status page. Lisa, could you look up the total number of chapters at the moment, please?
I'm just trying to figure out what percentage of them to put as the number.
I think it's around 250 odd chapters. So if we look at 90 odd meetings, 250 chapters, about 2/5 of them have had a meeting.
Okay, cool.
It doesn't give total, I'd have to add them up,
That's
but
right.
it's over
Directionally.
250.
That's all right. Directionally, that's good. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. The one thing that we are actually actively looking at the moment, and Harold is leading this, is to identify with project leaders how they want to hold a project summit this year. There was very low participation at AppSec Dublin. So holding the project summits in conjunction with AppSec Globals doesn't seem to be a working strategy. So let's find out what the project leaders actually want to do, and let's hold a project summit that they will attend as a standalone event, most likely. So that'll come up later this year. Flagship project audit has been complete, no overt violations of vendor neutrality. The project committee leader has volunteered to get OSI. So Mark, your question about the number of projects with GPL, we're getting the answer for you for that. The fact is, we don't have an easy way of tracking the number of licenses. Yeah, according to Grant, there's 465 chapters.
And I see that Harold actually beat me to the page.
Yeah,
No,
very
it's
good.
not. It's active. There's 283 active chapters.
Oh, there you go.
It's on the local chapter page.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
there we go. So the grants that are currently outstanding, we've got some that are approved and are currently working. There's I approved a grant of less than 10,000 American dollars to the Open CRE project. There's a number of other ones that are actually active at the moment. CRS, for example, has completed their things. There was a lot of invoices going through last month for Christian. So that should have been completed. And events. I know the board is always excited about events. It looks like, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, or Lauren, it looks like AppSec Dublin may actually be a little bit profitable, which is fantastic. So very good about that. We've got AppSec DC coming up, and there's still some profitability elements that need to be worked upon sometimes. Some of the things like, for example, food and beverage and other sundries catch you out as the time goes on. So we'll try and get that profit nailed down, plus or minus 5 to 10% sooner or later. Okay, regionals. AppSec Cali doesn't look like it's going to be run again. The organisers don't seem to be interested in doing it. Snowfrock is on its way. We've been getting everything. It's running early next week. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that one works out. And they're looking to make a small profit of around 17,000, which will be very helpful for them. Basque, they always seem to spend about 10,000 and earn about, earn about 10,000. So I'm not worried about Basque at all. AppSec Israel, how's it going, Arby?
It's going good. It's we're on track, as it says. We expect to turn a bit of a profit. The original estimates are probably lower than expected because we decided to actually charge a nominal fee, but that might offset the direct costs of catering as well. Small fee, probably like $20-$30 or less. But again, lost out a bit, so it might be a bit more profitable.
Okay, very good.
And sponsors are going well as well.
Yep. There's a little bit of toing and froing at the moment with AppSec Singapore. We're hoping to have that run sometime in Q4. Lauren, you were mentioning that you were actually in contact with them last week. Has that moved on at all?
Yeah, we've narrowed it down to the first 2 weeks in October, looking at Wednesday training, Thursday conference. I reached out to the venue and just waiting for availability, which we should have this week to see what they have.
So that's going to be our third global AppSec, which is a goal that boards have set out for us several years in a row. So hopefully that will be a nice Asia Pacific conference. And the Pacific Northwest days, they almost always make money, and so I don't have any concerns about them. I look forward to actually seeing them run their actual conference. It's always well organized, so no issues there.
I had a hand up, Andrew, sorry. Can you just go back? So at AppSec Cali, my understanding was that used to be a pretty well attended conference. Why are they no longer interested, and then why don't we just find other people to host it, given that it had a pretty big attendance before?
There's a lot of personal. How about I brief you on that later in a private forum?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yep.
Yeah,
no
that's probably the safest way of getting a more complete answer to you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so we're looking at budgeted profit for some of it's come in, some of it's not. So it's on track is where it's at the moment. And the CFP and CFT are closed. So hopefully the speakers and keynotes can be sorted very soon so we can start marketing it as hard as we possibly can to get the 1,000 odd folks to come. Avi.
Small update on the CFP. We will be reopening that after a few discussions. It closed apparently way too early, and there is some quality issues with some of it, and I mean it's kind of borderline amount. So we'll be reopening it soon and closing it a bit closer to the date. But CFT is closed, and the CFP should still be closed in plenty of time to get that sorted as well.
Cool, excellent. If we could get the keynotes nailed down, that can sometimes help drive sales as well.
2 of the keynotes have already confirmed.
Fantastic.
And the other 2, one of which you're reaching out to, Andrew. I'll poke you about that after the meeting.
Okay, lovely. Okay, planning, we've talked about that. Snowfrock, it's on track. It's happening very, very shortly. And those guys know what they're doing. They've held this several years in a row. So I have no concerns with their organization. On track for Israel, we heard. German OWASP days looks like it's on track. It's going to make a budgeted profit, so that's fantastic. Those guys have run this conference several times. I have no qualms about the conference. And again, we've talked about Pacific Northwest. Looks like a small profit of around 23,000. That's going to be fantastic for them. BusCon, they always run an excellent conference. If you are in Texas in late October or can extend your trip for AppSec Global to go to LASCon and then come to us, that'd be fantastic as well. It's a very well run conference. Those guys know what they're doing. Tiana and Kyle always put on a good conference, so it's worthwhile. And with that, that's the end of that slide. And so we'll get on to main business and I'll stop sharing. Any questions? Oh, well, no worries. Grant?
Apologies. Controls moving around my screen again. So the first order of new business is the NetGuru website redesign. Andrew actually mentioned it during the question from Mark on what would we be doing with the current cash on hand. One of the things that we could do is indeed have a look at the website redesign. Mark actually engaged NetGuru to do a POC and a teaser for a much more functional version of the OWASP website, much more usable way of interacting with people. That teaser is available from this link. There's a link out to the teaser site. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, you really should, because they did an amazing job. Mark, I can't thank you enough for that introduction. They really have blown us away.
Yeah, no problem. Just to be clear, that was all pro bono. And there was nothing I did. I just asked them.
Yeah, all of that work is pro bono. They have said that they're prepared to do the actual job for us as well, which is they've given us an estimate. It's not an insubstantial amount of money, but given what it is, it's, I think, not an unreasonable amount of money either. Andrew, do you have the plan to hand?
Let me just go back to the slides that they've got. Give me a couple of seconds while I do that.
Sure.
Do you want to demonstrate the teaser while I get that up?
Sure. Trusting that this actually, oh, hang on, I probably shouldn't have done that. But
we published all the work that was there, because there were the personas developed, there was the user stories and all of that. Is that all sort of available and linked out, or just the just the end result?
Yeah, so just the end result is available on this link, but all of that other stuff is available. It is in the OWASP Google Workspaces, and it is available for members to take a look at. Yeah, so this is essentially the overview that they intended us to go for. It's the first thing is that it brings you to a page that allows you to search for what it is you're looking for. It does also allow you to explore things in a specific way. So looking at just the flagship resources, each one of the projects would then have a slide like this, or a view like this, to show what it does, what the details of it would be. That would take you to a details page. The little flag highlighting the fact that this is a flagship project. They're also talking about tagging each of the projects so that it's easier to find projects that are related to each other in some way. That information would allow you to then explore it by topics, so you could find out what the topics were, or because it's a part of something that you're doing. So it's either in web, or it's in general, it's mobile, whatever it might be, and details on each of that. So a lot of this is going to be leveraging the work that's been done by the OpenCRE project and using those tags to help tie together all the information. But it would become a very reactive, very responsive website where the data that you're looking for is easy to find, including things like I want to participate in things. So I want to help build a new project. I have a new idea for a new project, which is difficult to see in our current website. And at the top, of course, it's a call out that's quite clear: becoming a member and donating. And of course, they'd have to do this for the tools, the learnings, chapters, for events. The teaser only covers the projects, the tools themselves, and all the projects.
I do have the estimate up, as well as the final summary deck.
Okay, you want to pull that up?
Yeah, sure. What do people want to see first? I mean, basically, there's a lot of stuff that they gave us, like the findings and whatnot, or do you want to see their estimation?
I think my take, Andrew, would be there's so much stuff to go through. It would be efficient use of the time, but making sure everyone knows how to get to it if they wanted to. But
yeah, sure. I can link all of this. Okay, so they gave us an estimation. The Grant and I worked out that it's roughly somewhere in the range of 603 to 731 in total for all 8.5 modules. If we just want to do projects on the home page, it's going to be roughly somewhere in the range of 300,000 to 330,000 or thereabouts but then you'll have parts of the website that look fantastic, and then we've got what we have. So it's really about whether or not we start to shop this around as a piece of work, whether we do it as a dollar for dollar match, or whether we can find someone to just fund it completely. I'm not sure, but we've never had such a large donation before, and so it may be very difficult for us to raise that sort of funds for something that's so inwardly facing rather than a program deliverable.
My initial reaction, for what it's worth, I think they've done the most amazing work, but that's a hell of a lot of money.
It is.
And I've seen many estimates for sites of this size that are significantly less. So I think we should, I think the work that they've done is fantastic, but no, I don't think that's good value for money, despite the quality of the work in any sense. That needs to be rethought significantly.
I think they have massively overestimated the work, which is why they've given us the numbers that are on this page. We'll then talk about the modules themselves and what those modules might entail, but they want to actually estimate each module as they do the work. And it's a good idea because I think they intend to build our chapters management system, so effectively replicate meetup.com for us in our website in code themselves. And they also appear to be wanting to replicate the functionality that's present for our events. So I think that they've massively overestimated. And even if we take, and the reason Andrew and I did the sums to give you the big number is because, you know, nothing's going to sound worse than the 800,000 that Andrew's given you as a big number, right? The actual result is going to be far less expensive than that. But I would agree that this is.
Yeah, I mean, replicating meetup.com or event stuff just seems an absolute waste of money as well. Right?
Yeah, no, and we obviously wouldn't go that route, right? We'd still, I mean, I'd rather spend the money on Meetup or
an
AMS.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess my suggestion is one way is to go back and kind of refine the scope a lot more with them around exactly what needs to be done, which might allow them to sharpen the pencil, but it feels that it's also something that probably needs to be well, just with diligence anyway. It should be socialized with at least 3 people. It probably feels like we can go get a much better job anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have some other people that may be interested in doing some pro bono work on this stuff. I'd hate to that anyone that's done anything feels disenfranchised, but there are some other people that may be interested, so I can also make some calls.
If you'd be happy to do that, Mark, that would be greatly appreciated. And if we do move forward with NetGuru, having the conversation around what exactly we need and how much that's going to cost, yeah, that's something that needs to be done as well. But as a whole, how does the board feel about spending a not insubstantial amount of money on actually getting our website to the point where it's a responsive, modern interface to what we do as a foundation? Are there any thoughts?
My personal, I think it's important, but I think that until there's a strategy and a set of priorities, I don't know where that sits in the rest of the priorities. So I think that plan needs to be done before I can even say whether I think it's clearly important, but there are lots of things that are important. Right? So I don't know where it sits in that stack.
Sure. Avi?
I agree with what Mark is saying, but I would even take it further and say that whatever our strategy is, the website is a tool for that. So it's not that we have to prioritize this against other things. It will be, no matter what the strategy is, no matter what we prioritize, the website would be supporting that. Now, given that we don't know which we're prioritizing yet, I think it might be a little bit too soon to decide which of these areas we want to focus on and how much we want to invest in that. But the fact that I think it's very clear that we all want to spend a substantial amount of money to do this. We're just not clear what this is just quite yet, which parts we want to focus on and how much to spend there. Would that be fair to say, Mark?
I would say a little different. I think that this is clearly important. but where it sits above the line or below the line is TBD. Obviously, we'd all love to do everything, but the reality is we can't, and where it sits, it's yeah.
I think
So for me anyway.
I think regardless of the strategy, putting that strategy out to the world is going to require us to make these changes. But you're right, it may not be the first thing on that list. And if we had infinite money and time, it would definitely be on the list of things that we're going to do. But the question is, do we have infinite money and time?
Realistically, I would suggest to the board that we actually look into various changes, including no change, replacing it with something else, and also maybe going to other vendors and shopping around the like an RFP. I don't want to delay it forever, but at the same time, I don't think you've got all the options in front of you at the moment.
I mean, I definitely think if you get a tight scope on it, then it will both allow NetViewer to go back and sharpen the pencil, but it also allows you to go out and talk to other people and be able to compare apples to apples, right? So it feels like that's a precursor anyway.
Sure. Pat?
Yeah, I was just going to say, conceptually, I like this idea. I mean, I was part of OWASP when we retired the wiki and moved over to GitHub. And I think at that time, the understanding was, let's get GitHub and how it's today working, and then worry about making it look pretty or better. And I think this is a good step in that direction. I also agree that we need to figure out the overall strategy and priorities and where this falls in amongst those. But I think as a general concept, I think the website could definitely use a little bit of love in terms of design.
Yeah. We are looking at improving the how to contribute and a few other things that we can get going on before any website redesign. We need every flagship project in particular needs to have what Zap has, which is how to get going, how to hack on it, how to get involved, some good first starter issues and things like that. We're actually working upon that in the background at the moment. That can move forward regardless of whether or not we do a website redesign. So some of the usability issues that NetGuru identified, we're trying to address before we even get down this pathway. Right.
Do we take any actions away from that? There were a number that were mentioned.
I think Mark asked me to actually see whether or not we can sharpen the pencil and maybe come up with a scope that we could shop around. I think that's a thing that we should probably try to do.
Also to make that proposal more findable.
Yeah. Put it all into a folder and then link it perhaps from the board Slack channel.
Yep, I can do that for you. I've already started doing it, but it's not quite there yet. There's a number of videos that they've uploaded, which are huge.
And the next order of new business is being brought up by Matt and Avi. It's the OWASP Foundation Economy Plus travel policy exception. So recently the board voted to require economy travel for all flights. This happened earlier this month. And the board wishes to discuss an exemption to this policy for the foundation staff for flights over 7 hours total flight time. Matt, anything you want to add to what's here in the background?
Yeah, just a little further background on it. The idea here being that while I agree we should do some sort of cost containment, I'd also like to give discretion to the ED to make decisions that make sense for the day-to-day operations. And I don't know that we need to necessarily tell the ED operationally what he or she needs to do. So I like the idea, particularly of staff having to travel internationally, not having to be cramped in a plane, because I'm cramped in a plane. I'm also maybe generally larger than most of the staff. I don't know. I haven't compared, but I think Economy Plus is a reasonable ask. And if you look at what travel policies are generally for corporate travel, I've always been able to do one up from economy. So it seems like giving Andrew the discretion to do this for our staff so that they arrive in fair health is a good thing. Oh, and I would like to know the travel number, because that is one thing we didn't have when we made the decision prior.
Sure. Shelby?
Yeah, I sent Andrew a note on this last night. So I looked for 2022. We had total travel expenses that were booked of $55,877. Of that, I can see that roughly 13,000 was clearly coded to flights. There were also some expense reports that had multiple items charged, and QuickBooks was down, unfortunately, so I wasn't able to dig into the exact details. But so those that had combined charges were about $18,000. So in total, I mean, we're looking at like $25,000 for flights last year with some other items combined. I can give you a better number for the flight total if you need it. But I wasn't able to.
So Shelby, we only spent $25,000, and that included speaker flights, board flights, and staff flights.
Yes.
It did. It was really the only flights we had, or the majority were for the AppSec in San Francisco.
Right, and that was COVID, so it's not a reflective year, right? I'm assuming that is that the case? Because that's an incredibly low number, right?
Yeah, I'd say last year we were just ramping back up. So I would say this year with the with there being more events, the travel number is definitely going to go up.
Yeah.
$25,000 on an event.
Yeah.
So
Well, everyone knows my
times two.
opinion on it. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
everyone knows my opinion on it, but I'll share it for the video anyway. The world is in a shitty economy. People are being laid off left, right, and center. We are in a situation where we're discussing funding. We're 58K over budget in January. I think the signal that it sends to projects is absolutely the wrong signal. And so I don't think it's the right thing to do, but that's my opinion.
Just to be very transparent with the board, there was also travel to Austin for the SBOM. So there was some flights for Steve Springett, a gentleman from Alaska, and myself and Harold to the SBOM summit. And then there was also Black Hat DEF CON. There was myself and Harold, and I believe that we covered off some board travel as well. The reality here is also, if we need to send staff earlier, we're going to be spending some money on hotels for an extra day. Or alternatively, we're spending some money on a flight upgrade. So just keep that in mind. It's not a zero-sum game here.
That's primarily why I wanted to leave this to the ED's discretion. I mean, it seems like we're getting way into the weeds, to be honest. And the keeping the staff comfortable, happy, and treated well, I think is worth the premium to move from economy to economy plus, in my mind. We have a tiny staff. We probably ought to keep them generally happy.
Harvey?
I want to be explicit. If the total was $25,000, then the extra cost for Economy Plus was probably in the range of $5,000, because most of the flights don't qualify for that exception that we had. So we're talking about $5,000, maybe $10,000. Even if we double it, it's not a lot. And as Matt said, it's really about treating the staff well.
Look, let's just move on. We've got bigger things to deal with. I still think the signaling is wrong, but let's just move on. We've got bigger things to deal with.
Okay. If there are no more questions, no more comments, then I'll bring it to a vote. And let me find a list. Starting at the top, Mark.
No.
Matt.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Harvey.
Yes.
Glenn.
No.
I got everyone.
Yourself. Bandana's absent.
So if I vote yes, then it passes.
So do you vote?
Yeah, I vote yes, it passes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Right, it moves us into other business. And the reason that Tom has been waiting patiently. So the first order of other business is CREST OVS and the OWASP Foundation collaboration update. Tom, do you have something you want to share, or?
I do. We'll just probably talk through it. I'd also like to introduce Nick on the line here. Nick is our executive director, our CEO of CREST globally. So just a little background, and then I'll hand it over to Nick. As you may recall or may know from the prior board meeting notes, as well as some of the activities that have taken place last year, in the fourth quarter of last year, we launched an accreditation program of businesses that focus on providing deep application security services. And we were asked by both governments and large ISVs to help build a program that could easily be picked by the buyer for organizations that have some of these disciplines. We collaborated both with the ASVS and the ASVS team, as well as many members in the community, to come up with a reasonable standard that accredits the business and also leverages the hard work that OWASP has been doing for many, many years. As many of you know, I served on the board for 10 years here, so it's a labor of love as well. And we launched the program with the board's full support in August of last year publicly. And then in the fourth quarter, we had sort of our first sort of at bat, meaning it started to roll out. So we intend to step up, quarterly and award a check to you guys and answer any questions. But again, this is in partnership, I guess, with OWASP or in parallel with OWASP. It does not ban any other organization from doing the exact same thing. But it is a commitment of CREST to work with OWASP and then donate back sustainable revenue to OWASP to help out, which I think is one of your strategic goals is building those things. So with that, I'll pass the mic to Nick.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you for having us. So as Tom says, we launched the first tranche of 5 members accredited to this new OWASP verification standard accreditation, or OVS as we call it, back at the end of October. We think this does mark the beginning of a really successful partnership, and we are pleased to confirm the first revenue share payment, which is, as Tom says, designed to support the sustainability of the OWASP programs. So the payment is of 15% of the proceeds from the initial Q4 fees that we received, which is around about the $2,300 mark. I realize that is not going to set the world alight, but we see it as an initial marker in the sand that we hope to build on. We've now got 8 accredited member firms against OVS, and there's another 25 plus member firms out of our 300 or so currently going through the application process. So we do expect more to come in 2023 and more revenue share payments. Anyone can now go online onto our website, crestapproved.org, find the accredited OVS companies. Buyers are already contacting our accredited firms through our website. We have functionality on our site where prospective buyers can directly contact our member firms, and we know they're doing that related to OVS already. So we do think the momentum is starting to build, but it will be a little bit of a slow burn at the beginning. And as the name gets out there, as the accreditation is better understood by the buying community, we expect that momentum to grow. But of course, there is effort on our part, and to a degree, you guys, if possible, to get that name out there. So we do have a couple of ideas to strengthen the uptake going forwards. We've been promoting OWASP globally through the program. The OVS program we've been talking about at conferences and in our general member comms. Would be great. Maybe we can explore with you guys potential for some additional promotion to the OWASP membership in whatever way you think may be appropriate. And then we're also looking at the Washington DC AppSec USA conference in October. Perhaps that might be an opportunity for us to explore perhaps roundtables around AppSec assurance more generally. We can bring in regulators, buyers, other providers to those sorts of events. But really, we're open-minded. In summary, we think it's been a successful start. We're pleased to be able to present the check, but we think there's more we could do, and very open to a conversation with you guys, either here or at another juncture, about how we might go about doing that. I don't want to keep too much of your time. So, Tom, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, Nick, that's all we got, but thank you.
Back to you, Grant.
Thank you both very much. Does anyone have any questions? Avi?
Thanks very much for that, guys. I just want to know, Tom, are you making like a big cardboard check?
Yeah, rubber one.
It's actually funny you say that. I was actually telling Nick that it's kind of like presenting a little bit of a cardboard check in those exact words. But the nice part, I think, is if quarterly we touch base or whatever the mechanism is, I just want to make sure you guys see progress and everyone's looking at this as a sustainable opportunity for all parties. Again, nonprofit working together. And Grant knows this as well. We're doing this with a lot of other nonprofits through the nonprofit cyber initiative underway as well.
Anybody else? Any questions for Tom? Oh, I see Andrew, you got your hand up.
Thank you. Let me just lower my hand. Tom or Nick, basically we mail out to our members on a semi-regular basis, about once a quarter, all of the member benefits. If you can provide us a paragraph or two that we can put into that mail out, I'd love to be able to get that out and provide a little bit more visibility into what they can achieve with Crest. So maybe touch base with me later and we'll get you onto that email when we talk to our members about the member benefits that we have at the moment.
That'd be fab. Andrew, thank you. We'll do
Oh,
that.
mercy, Nick. It looks like you got about 300 members, including some pretty impressive people. Can we get access to I was going to say markets to them? That's probably the incorrect phrase, but you know what I mean. Right? Can we get access for you to get some info to?
Yeah, Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, really at this point, it's mutual goals, Mark, right? We are trying our best to drive the messaging into all regions of the world. As you know, Crest has a footprint in many of those regions. We know OWASP has great footprints in many of those regions as well. And there is some common language and common things and common goals, right? Raising software security issues and making them better. Like, I think that's a collaborative effort. Andrew and myself actually provided a little bit of a summary. I'll just throw it in chat so you guys can look at it at your leisure. But that's what was launched at Black Hat. That's sort of the that we put together that kind of helps start it off. But again, anything we can do together, I'm happy to take those calls offline and then make it work.
Great. An impressive list of members.
All right, just saving the link for later. Well, thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it.
All right. Well, no other questions. We're going to drop, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. The next order of other business is the new hires, roles and responsibilities. But given the nature of this, it might be worth parking this until we've had our strategy session. Andrew has asked if that can be done, and I don't see any problem with that. Does the rest of the board agree with this?
Makes sense.
Technically, as we're changing the agenda, I need a 2/3 vote. So I'm going to say aye.
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
It sounds like we've got it. All right. Discussion on the community review process. This actually came out because of the policy changes, all policy changes that we currently go through. We push through the community review process because of the the history the foundation has with decisions made by the board affecting how the community is able to operate and what happens to those community members. The question was raised as to whether all policy changes need to go through this process, whether it's necessary, and whether it's even desirable. For example, the change to the travel policy has triggered this process. Is that the right change to make? I mean, is that the sort of level of change to a policy that should trigger a process as fairly heavy as this one? Is it my hand that's up? Why is my hand up? Anyway, yeah, is there anything else that we need to talk about on that? Mark, it was you that triggered the question what the process looks like and why was it necessary for all processes or for all policy changes?
Just feels like red tape to me.
Anyone have a comment on that? While I try and figure out how to put my hand down.
I would agree that not everything wouldn't, this doesn't feel like a substantial change that has a massive impact on the wider community. I don't think something like this should go through the community review. That said, I think larger changes should, to get community input, buy-in, so that a hypothetically malicious board doesn't kind of co-opt all the processes around it. Not to say that they can't change the policy approval process, but at least there will be another step in between. I am not sure how to quantify or, make it clear which ones need to be go through the process.
100% with you, Ali. 100% with you.
It's like trying to figure out what constitutes a major change and should be thoroughly reviewed by the application security team.
Stop it.
Change to the number according to the number of characters in the policy change.
Why don't we take it offline and someone can come up with a proposal of what the meaningful change is, and then there's got to be some way to be able to do that. So
I think
precedents, isn't it?
I think I'll have a shot at that because I need to have a look at the community review process anyway, because we've been using consent packages, but I'm not sure it's documented for minor changes such as spell checking and URL fixes. They don't go through any review. But I would imagine that there's a way that we could determine this.
Would have to be something to do with impact or
like, for example, the travel policy has an impact upon a very small number of people, whereas the membership policy affects 7,000 people basically. So I would imagine that there's a way that we could actually work this out.
Cool.
So let me have a shot at it.
Harold, your hand's raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the purpose behind the policy, just to keep that in mind, which was twofold, I believe, and that is the community used to frequently get perturbed, of course, whenever we make changes behind the scenes, if you will, without consulting them. So this was put in as a way to give the community a chance to provide feedback for policy so that it didn't become a, blow up the leaders board about all these problems because they weren't consulted. So this was partially that. And of course, as we mentioned, partially to keep changes from happening, one board to the next, that kind of thing, without going through the community review process. But with anything big that affects the community. Anyway, that's it.
Bill?
Yeah, I just thought it might be helpful. I was on the community review process, and I thought it might be helpful for me just to talk very briefly how it actually works, which is you have a proposed policy. We have a period of time where the community can comment on it. Sometimes some of the policies got very few or no comments, and sometimes they were very controversial and we get a lot of comments. And so that's the first part. The community provides a bunch of comments. We would gather them all into a single spot. And then the review board was made up of people from different aspects of the community. So there was a committees person, there was a projects person, we had a staff member there, and then we would read all the comments and then decide on some sort of common thing that we all could agree on. So someone might say, like with the travel policy, someone might say, oh, you should always cover economy no matter what. And someone might say you should never cover economy no matter what. And so you have these two very opposed positions. And so then we as the review board would go and discuss it. And then much like the board here, we'd vote and we'd come across some sort of common, usually we'd compromise into some sort of central position. That would be the thing that would then be brought up to come back to the board to vote on as what the community wanted to see happen. And so it was a way to provide like the projects and the committees and whatnot, a means to being able to affect policy and make sure their views were being respected. And the community had an opportunity, obviously, to participate as well. So I thought it worked pretty well. It does take some time. And so I don't, unless there's something pressing, I kind of feel like we should just let the community continue to participate when we're going to make changes to policies, other than obviously for spelling changes or fixes or things like that. That's it.
Okay, what I'd like to do then is have Avi and Mark go away and write something up, come to the board with a proposal. If the board chooses to adopt that proposal, I will suggest that it goes through the community's review process as the last chunk to change, because it probably that does affect a lot of the community. And if you guys are happy with that, then
Andrew just volunteered to do it, Grant.
yes, he did. But Andrew volunteers to do everything.
I know, so let him keep volunteering.
I would prefer if we picked it up and ran with it, though. This is us who's going to be making this change.
Didn't Andrew say that? Oh, okay, that's fine. I thought Andrew said that he needed to go and review something anyway. Didn't you, Andrew?
He has to write up how the how we make use of consent packages and whether that's part of the process or not.
Okay, don't worry. Abby and I'll take care of it. Cool.
We do have one last item on the other business, Diversity Inclusion Committee needing a charter. I don't see anybody from the Diversity and Inclusion Committee here.
No. And I do have their new charter, but unless they're here to talk about it, I don't know that it's worth going forward with this item.
No, I would agree with that, especially as there are some concerns I have with the way the charter is currently written. I'll reach out to Spiros and to Zoe and see if I can't work with them to put something together so I understand what they want the charter to include, so they can actually present that to the board next month. But in the meantime, we do have a little bit of time left in this board meeting. And when we went through the minutes of the previous meetings, I forgot to add an item to the agenda. In the last meeting, we discussed the role of this board, and Mark asked if we could bring that discussion to this meeting. Are you happy for me to bring that forward now, Mark?
Yeah, please.
So again, 2/3 majority requirement for that. I'm in favor. It's 1, 2. Anyone else? Mark?
Me.
Matt?
Looks like Glenn's got his hand
Glenn's got his hand up. Perfect. Excellent. Then let's discuss it. So that was in the minutes of the previous meeting, and it was the role of the board. So the board structure.
Mm-hmm.
There is some information in here, but it's very quick, my shorthand. And there's also a snippet of the mind map that I was using at the time to talk about it. But effectively, we discussed how the board aspirationally operates today. And the reason for that being aspirational is kind of in there. Or at least was discussed in that meeting, so it's in the recording. And we did discuss other options, and I have listed a couple of the options here. But Mark, I believe you wanted to talk a little bit more clearly about the OpenSSF option as a potential option for the board.
No, I don't think OpenSSF is an option for OWASP. It's a model, but I don't think it's the right one for OWASP. What would be super helpful is maybe you could explain. I mean, clearly the number of seats is always important in a board. It's not just the roles, as it were. So could you just expand on that mind map or whatever that is, and just kind of walk me through what that is and sort of how it came about?
Yeah, so this was literally just my doodling as to what the current board is. We currently are 7 members, all of whom are elected. The idea with that election is that it's then a democratic board, and the board itself operates in a democratic way, and that we're supposed to be representative of the community. Now, there are issues with democracy, democratic processes, and representative, which we did discuss, as in the number of people who vote. And then the second aspect of the board is that we are intended to be strategic rather than an operational board. And there are some points where the board tends to cross over into more operational work than strategic work. But this is the board as it is today, as it's supposed to be. So the aspirations of this current board are 7 members who are elected democratically to be representative of the community and to operate at a strategic level. We then discussed other options to that, including potentially having some members not be elected, but be appointed. And the mechanisms of those appointments could be either through the executive director selecting individuals who are professional board members to join the board, to add some of their professional board skills to the skills that the board has, because we're not professional board members, most of us, all the way through to potentially the OpenSSF model, where board members, where board seats are assigned to sponsors above a certain level. So organizations that fund the organization then get a say in how that organization runs and operates. And also the variations on how operationally the board could be involved or should be involved in the day-to-days.
Okay, super helpful. So here's my take. I think that one of the key things, well, there's several key things that we have to try and solve for. One is that we have to have a board or a project governance structure which allows, encourages, is attractive, all of those things for large corporate sponsorship. Now, what that, I think there's a bunch of models for that. Clearly, the OSSF one works for that in the fact that they have very large corporate sponsorships, but I think there's a significant negative to that. And I don't think that model fits OWASP. But there are some things that I think are interesting to observe around that, particularly how, very large corporates, get involved. And I think that has 2 things. One, it brings a lot of funding into the project. And 2, it enables engagement from the likes of Google, the likes of Microsoft, which at a strategic level, we don't have today. So I think that's one thing that we need to figure out how to solve for. The second thing is, if you look at the board structure today, and I kind of mentioned this before, of course, there was very low turnout for the last board votes. But if you do the math, it's like 50 odd grand to buy enough votes to get 3 board seats, right? Like, that's very fragile, right? And I think everyone can recognize that's a fragile position. And then also, let's be honest, I'm a security vendor, Vidana is a security vendor, Matt's a security vendor, the rest of your consultants, apart from Bill, that is outwardly, that's a structure which basically, could be described as an echo chamber, it could be described as all sorts of things, but it's not one that I think when you look at something, if I put myself in the seat of a large financial services company, and I think, great, am I going to going to fund a lot of money. It's great. I'm going to fund a bunch of security tools vendors, and I'm being the the pessimistic Brit, right, or whatever the phrase is. I'll be reminding what the phrase is in a minute, I'm sure. But it's it's like the skeptic will say, great, just funding a bunch of security vendors and a bunch of security consultants to go do a bunch of stuff that's gonna do that. So for me, like, we have to look at that structure and say, well, okay, what does it look like in order to solve for those problems, right? Remove the fragility, make it attractive for large scale, donations and funding of the project, and make it attractive for those to have a much more diverse set of people, not just security consultants and security tools vendors. With respect to the strategic thing, independent board members are always great. I don't think it should be appointed by the ED. Typically, that's agreed as being independent and acceptable to all board members. It's normally the way that's done, and I think that would be absolutely great, particularly considering if you have a voting structure, those independent members can often make sure that everyone is keeping themselves whole. So if you have representation from people, from big tech, from consulting companies, from security vendor companies, maybe from the government, whoever those things are, those independent people, are able to keep everyone whole if the board is structured in the right way. So that's the things for me that need to get solved around how it happens. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll pause there.
Any questions from other members of the board? Comments?
I'll have a comment, or at least a question for Mark. When you say a board governance structure that attracts large corporate sponsorship, are you talking about reserving 1 or 2 seats for corporates, or are you talking about something that gives them a bit more, like, for example, a advisory board that provides advice to this board?
I think that I don't know, Andrew, is the answer, which is why I think it's a discussion. But I think that what needs to be is that if I'm going to donate a large amount of money, I want to know where it's going, right, and how it's being used, and I want to be able to have a say in it. Years ago, when Dennis came to me asking me for a large amount of money from Microsoft to do a .NET project, like, it was, my response was, what are you going to do with it? And the response was, we're going to do a bunch of security stuff around .NET. Like, that didn't enable me to go to my boss at Microsoft and say, here's what, a large chunk of money. So with the structure needs to be, whatever that structure needs to be one where those large corporates can feel that they can justify doing that. And my suggestion is we go and ask them. I mean, I think everyone has reservations around the OSSF model, which is essentially, I'm not saying this, but I've heard is described as pay to play. And that doesn't feel right for OWASP, but I do believe that we need to figure out a model that does allow those large corporates to feel that they can donate, feel that they have a say in the project, whilst balancing the things that has been successful for in the past. I don't know, to answer the question, Andrew, probably a waffle a bit. It's getting late here.
Thank you.
Avi, you had your hand raised earlier, but I suspected it went down the moment Mark mentioned advisory board, or Andrew mentioned advisory board.
It wasn't just that. I actually went down when Mark said he doesn't know. I mean, that was the question I was about to ask. I mean, like, so what is it we actually want to be doing here?
I mean, yeah,
we don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's a discussion. I think if we agree the things that we're trying to solve for, then you can look at the different things the different options that will solve for those things. And there's a combination of both how those people are presented, and then the mechanisms of what they have. Like, I think like, as an example, I'll throw out, like, one thing I think is perfectly reasonable is that you may have people that are the equivalent of board observers. If you sat in any commercial, boards, you often know there are board observers. They get to sit, they get to offer their opinion, but they don't get a vote. Like, that may be something which is a middle ground, which is acceptable to someone, as a corporate donor. maybe, may not be. But these are things that we can go test and understand what would work and what won't work. But I think the first thing is to agree what those goals and what you're trying to solve for. And I'll happily take an action to list what I think those goals are. We can battle around and make sure we're clear if that's useful.
And just to follow up with that statement, Mark, because that sounds actually really interesting. Would you see board observers be based on the highest level of sponsorship or something else, a different factor, or what?
I don't know. It's the honest answer. I mean, there's multiple different ones. Like I have observers on company that I'm involved with, which is representations from, intelligence communities, right? They're interested in kind of what's going on, and they have an investment in the company, but they don't have a vote in what happens, right? Like that's one kind of scenario. So it might be. I honestly don't know, and I don't know again if an observer role is enough for someone to provide sponsorship, but it might be enough for someone, say, from the government, who we would consider to be a kind of, keen industry that we need to engage with, as an example, right? So again, if we kind of think about the things that you try to solve for, that the different types of board seat may be different, depending on the things you're trying to solve for. If that makes sense.
So an observer sounds like a layer below an advisor, where they would actually speak. Observers would sit in the board meetings, which anyone is entitled to do currently.
No,
whereas an advisor,
observer is the same. An observer and an advisor in that case is the same thing. They just don't get to vote. Yeah. Typically, but again, that's a commercial board, right? And we're not a commercial board, so.
right. So this conversation, we've spent a fair amount of time talking about it in the previous session, and the reason that conversation was necessary is because it speaks to potentially interesting funding opportunities, which then would allow the rest of the strategy to actually be implemented. Maybe what we need to do is take this. I mean, this item isn't closed. This item we haven't actually come to a conclusion on changes, and failing to come to a conclusion on changes means that things stay the same. That's fine for now, but I think that I'd like to drop this together with a fundraising line item to below the strategic plan for projects and events, so that we have some idea of what the big, hairy, audacious goals are that we're trying to achieve look like, so that we take that into all right, how do we structure the board to get funding to deal with those strategic goals? Is everyone okay with me doing that?
What the strategic goals being what kind? Sorry, I'm looking through the bullet points over there. So
yes,
I see.
So the next two bullet points down are the strategic plan for projects and for events. Now that's back in this messy spreadsheet.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But I think yeah.
No, go on, sorry.
Just so that this item and this item, because they are kind of tied together, that the two of them both drop below, above the role of committees in our strategic discussion.
I think for the most part that makes sense. I mean, for me, I kind of look at it and I think there's three things, right? There's representation. Like, how do we ensure that representation is just not security vendors, security consultants? Like, that's a really important thing, right? The second one is the fragility, like I said, around, I'm not saying anyone's going to spend 50 grand to buy votes, but it's technically possible. And I think we need to have a much more robust process for that. And then the third one is that board needs to be set up for funding. So if the representation thing may come out of, if we want to, have a set of projects that, I don't know, maybe interop with governments or interop with other things, then, or need the support of big tech or need the support of financial services or whoever, that probably makes sense. So yeah, thinking that through in my head, that makes sense, I think.
Yeah, I suspect representation is partially due to just the time commitment of being on the board. I think we all kind of self-select, right? Like we come from backgrounds where we have the flexibility to not be working right now, but be on a call and talking to each other. And I think a lot of people who might otherwise be interested in the board, they simply don't have that luxury. Their work will not support them to, hey, I'm going to be gone for a couple hours to be on this board meeting once a month. So that might factor into if we want more representation from the community, or perhaps you're alluding to other like entities like vendors and corporations.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how that may be the case, but if you look at some of the people that are on other boards like OSSF and stuff, you've got a lot of people from financial services, you know, healthcare companies, and a lot of other things. So I suspect it's a complex thing, but it feels like, you know, for me, it feels that the broad representation across the industry is important for many things, like, you know, funding and making sure that you're working on the right things and all of those things as well. So yeah, how to solve it, I'm not quite sure. We'll kind of why the problem thing, but it's also interesting to ask the question.
Avi, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize we're talking about one aspect of being representative, and it's an important one. You know, what our background is, vendors and consultants and you know, high tech and whatever consuming companies. But there are also other axes of representation, whether it's different parts of the community, you know, or more project leader focused or more chapter leader focused, right? Or other things, right? And of course, and at the personal level as well. I mean, whether it's gender, racial, geographical, cultural, and all that stuff. Somehow, all of those different axes somehow need to have the ideally representation in 7 people.
Or maybe
well,
not.
It doesn't have to be 7. It doesn't have to be 7.
It doesn't have to be 7. I mean, that's exactly the point. It doesn't have to be 7. I don't know that would be that much easier with 9, but we give us or whatever. I mean,
oh yeah. No. I'm not suggesting 9.
But my point is, you know, just want to mention, it was mentioned last week. Somebody suggested, I don't know who suggested, to reserve 1 seat for each of those different categories, and I'm calling that out because I don't think that would work either.
Yeah, totally. Look, I mean, having 7 white dudes on a board, which is perfectly possible right now, is not something we should do, right? It's just not like you know, equality and diversity is it's history has shown like you have to force change, and so yeah, absolutely.
Matt, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wanting a clarification from Mark on the industry term. Do you mean security industry? Do you mean industry at large? Well, what's your idea of industry?
Yeah. Sorry, so I meant industry at large in the sense of like, you know, do we have insurance companies? Do we have healthcare companies? Do we have government, like, you know, federal government? You know, the industry that we have is, or the industry representation that we have, like I said, is 6 out of the 7 of us are security tools vendors and consultants, Bill being the only CISO there, right? So it feels like that representation should be broader across, should represent the people that are doing AppSec, not just the consultants and the tools vendors that are delivering it as a service or as a vendor, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's kind of what I assumed, but I wanted to make sure I was not assuming it correctly.
And does that make sense, Matt? It's like a goal, because
it does. It does. Yeah, perfectly. I assumed you meant it in a very broad sense, but I wanted to just clarify that in case there was confusion.
Yeah. And I think, look, geographically as well, it's kind of interesting, right? Like we're all European, or I guess at least Middle East or whatever is Israel technically, and then we've got North America, but like we have no one from Pacific Asia here, right? Like, you know, Japan and places like that are obviously extremely important, and so I guess those people have no representation around what's important for those regions, what's going on in those regions, whether it's privacy or security issues. Therefore, it makes it hard to have those people help direct what's important to be doing, right? So I mean, obviously we can't solve for everything, but it feels we should at least be conscious of it.
So here's what
Andrew doesn't count though. He's an American at this point, isn't he?
So here's a specific question, Mark. You know, you're talking about regional, you know, regional spread. There might be one very specific actionable thing that we could actually do right now to at least spread that out a bit, and that's to not have multiple directors from the same, you know, very specific area. For example, in the past, we have had multiple directors from the same city, the same chapter, right? And in cases that there have potentially been almost more than that. Hypothetically, is that something that would make sense to, you know, not allow multiple directors from the same, however we define region? It still doesn't automatically mean we'll not necessarily get a whole bunch of people from APAC and whatever, but at least it will prevent clustering.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I think if you want to go too prescriptive, like it'll almost be forced. But I think that, you know, if you like you said, if you solve for representation, which is both across the industry, is geographic and diversity, being it gender diversity and racial diversity, then it probably allows you to put a framework and even an idealized board. Whether you can achieve that or not may become something different. If you have a goal of, you know, we know that we need to fundraise, therefore, you know, what's a board structure that would allow you to go do that? And again, to Grant's point of within the things that you need to do, it's not just a game of raising money. Like that's just you know, that's not what the project's about. It's about raising the amount of money to fund it, right? And then making sure that it's resilient in the sense of, you know, how that structure can be maintained. Then I think once you have that, then it will tell you kind of what it should look like, right? Because again, that representation across industries may be a case of nominating people that don't happen to have a vote, right? But they're able to kind of input, as an example, maybe a case, right? I don't know. But we could look at it once you get it laid out.
Anyone else with any more comments on this? Just one thing to bear in mind when we have this conversation after getting through the strategy. Mark, you've a couple of times mentioned government. And while I definitely see the value in getting government involved in what it is we do and hearing from government to achieve the ends that we're probably going to want to have, our current structure as a foundation means that our interactions with governments need to be very careful, I think is the word I want to use here. We can't, the one thing we can't do as a foundation currently with our current structure is we can't actually lobby for changes in government. So just bear that in mind. If we do want to start doing that, that would mean a larger change to what we are as a foundation. It would actually mean a change to how we're registered as well.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. I mean, my, you know, if we look at things like DISA and, you know, other things related to that, right? Like not having people that are working on strategic things at a government level and international level involved feels like a missed opportunity, right? And there are very large funding grants that are also available to potentially help. But the way I was thinking about grant is on the inbound way versus trying to affect policy, which is.
Yeah, so all of that is totally acceptable, right? All of that's well within the bounds of the 503C. It's just affecting policy. Us spending money to affect policy is prohibited.
Don't we go to lobby for RASP everywhere and government buildings? Sorry.
The other side of that is that many of us, there are a lot of governments that will be opposed by people in other countries, in those countries as well, but it just becomes an issue.
Yeah, no, it totally does. But I, you know, you can't ignore that situation, right? When governments around the world are a very, very large part of security, right? Like,
yep,
I get it, but.
If there's no other comments, no other questions, no other items of business that need to be brought.
What's the relation to the board discussion and Grant? What's the next step? Because I know Andrew started writing stuff in your strategy document. Andrew, do you? What's the action thing here?
I'm following behind where we've actually had discussions. I'm assuming that we're not backtracking over previous discussions. And realistically, it's extremely early days for that document. I think there needs to be that full day strategy session so that we can get through some of the bullet points that were in the previous minutes that Grant showed. Basically, the plan needs to follow the strategy. The strategy hasn't been fully fleshed at the moment. If we want to do it within 30 days, I think we'll have to have a plan for a plan rather than the plan.
Yeah, which is something that was discussed at the leaders meeting. It's something that's been talked about with a number of the signatories of the letter. The letter is designed to spur progress and make sure that progress is actually being made.
Yes.
I have seen an email from Glenn already with a proposed doodle for times. Please take a look at that, because I think that's the next step. The next step is to work through the next step is to work through this list. And the next item on this list is to try and get that plan for projects together. This will provide a large portion of the answer to the open letter. We're not completely done then. We still need to deal with the other components of the foundation, chapters and events. That will then help us to talk about what the future of the board looks like and how we're going to go about funding it. So we'll probably be able to provide a strategic plan for projects without any meat to it, because it won't have any, and this is how we're going to pay for it, which is important. But I think it's important that the signatories to that open letter understand that that's what the next step is.
Yeah. I'm happy to write a blog post with the plan for a plan and work with you guys to draft that blog post so that we can get it out to the community in as open a way as possible.
Sure. The first step, though, is I think take a look at the doodle from Glenn and fill out as many times as you can, so we can get as big an overlap as we possibly can. And if we have quorum, we can keep moving forward on at least discussing the plan. It's better if all of us are able to attend, so that we don't spend a lot of the next session then talking to catch everyone up to things that were talked about in the previous session. But
yeah,
it's
my
hard.
apologies again for last week.
No, it's not. That wasn't aimed
14-year-olds. I'll leave it at that. No, I know.
Yeah, it's just really complicated, and I get it.
Totally.
This is all like the fourth or fifth job on our plates for many of us.
Yeah.
But the signatories of that letter are expecting an answer, so we do need to make progress and move forward. Are there any other items, any other questions, any other comments from anyone?
I don't think I've got the doodle. So Glenn, could you invite me to the doodle? But alternatively, just invite me to the meeting that's decided. I'll make time.
Thank you, Andrew. Then I'd like to move to adjourn. Do I have a second? Harvey. It is moved and seconded to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will stop the recording.